So now let's talk briefly about modifying config and properties files. So here's properties files. Liferay property files in red order are portal.properties, portal external properties, and portal setup wizard properties. You can modify the portal external properties file instead of the portal properties file. And then if you change the properties, you have to restart the server before the changes will take into effect. The portal setup wizard properties will also override the external properties. And this contains information about the admin user created through the wizard as well as the directory for Liferay home. And so through this, you have different levels that you can configure your instance with. We also have MIME type settings, and the best practice for maintaining and portability MIME type settings is to use config files. Settings can be found in portal properties, and MIME settings should be overridden in custom properties files. So here's a few on this slide of common property types that you might override. We'll also talk about reading document metadata now. Metadata can be added to all documents added to Liferay, and if the file has existing metadata, it will be imported into Liferay. You can also create custom fields to organize and label any files to meet your business needs. And so here's an example of an EXIF. We also have config files for configurations. You can export and manage configuration changes outside of Liferay using config files, and only config files saved in the database can be exported, so make a note of that. Config files can be downloaded and they will be named based on the specific setting they are configuring. If you change multiple settings for different applications at any scopes, many config files will be generated in the zip when you export it. And then inside a config file, you can see the details of whatever setting you changed for that application at that scope. Now we have configuring environment specific settings. So sometimes restoring previous configurations is not as simple as removing an imported config file. Removing a config file restores the previous default for the storage of Liferay's document library, and we can be sure to test config files by deploying and undeploying them to ensure that the settings are applied and then removed. If you make any changes to our instance using a configuration file, use the configuration file, then you can make additional changes. So now let's check. Liferay settings can be configured through properties files. And the read order of properties files is portal properties, portal X properties, and portal setup wizard properties. Config files can be easily deployed on any running DXP instance so that you can easily back up and manage system and application settings across multiple instances.